Thank you for supporting our mission and joining our movement by purchasing one of our platinum packages. With your help, we are spreading the awareness of the incredible impact that this sacred plant can have on your life and in the lives of those you love the most.
There's so much misinformation about this plant. I was the most guilty of assuming that this plant is only recreational and only utilized by those wanting to get high. And this couldn't be further from the truth. We spend a lot of time answering questions from patients around the world, families around the world, and you see a lot in the chat rooms, people talking about the fact that this is a bunch of garbage, that people just want to get high. This is not medicine, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So the focus on the getting high, the recreational use, is an area that we do not focus on. We're focused on the medical, and there are numerous, hundreds of thousands of people around the globe searching for one last chance, one last hope, and this plant is their hope. So the mischaracterization is the fact that this is only recreationally based and only to get high. There is so much medical potential in this plant, from an anti-inflammatory to an anti-cancer to sleep aid. The list goes on and on, but in our practice, working with people, I've seen it help patients go into remission. I have seen patients in total reversal of their autoimmune condition, whether it's fibromyalgia, lupus, Lyme disease. Granted, there are many adjunct therapies that help along the way. I've seen this plant help dramatically when combined with conventional treatment. So I have seen the gamut: autism, epilepsy, cancer, Crohn's, gastrointestinal, Alzheimer's, ALS, MS, the list goes on, and I've seen personally through our company the benefits of this plant. I've witnessed so much with this plant and the way it can address various diseases, numerous diseases. I've seen cancer patients go into remission. I've seen epileptic seizures reduced dramatically, autism. I've seen gastrointestinal diseases go into remission, lupus, Lyme, brain conditions, Alzheimer's, dementia. The list goes on and on, even as an exit drug for opiate addiction. There are numerous studies, numerous patients. It's endless when I see the beneficial properties of this plant. In simplest scenario, I've seen people's outlook on life improve when they have terminal cancer. I've seen them sleep better. I've seen them be able to recover enough to walk their daughter down the aisle at a wedding. I've seen many people not have to be in a morphine coma when they're transitioning, and they're able to interact with their loved ones until they cross over. I could go on and on, but those are the top parts that I come upon in my reflecting. The state laws are extremely confusing, state to state, but then state versus federal, extremely confusing. We have a hard time even keeping up with these laws that are ever changing. Even within some states, they'll change their laws once they've implemented a cannabis law. They'll even switch again. So you will find some states have medical legalization for various diseases. Each state has different lists of qualifying conditions, so it's always important to check with each state. There is not a lot of consistency there. Then you have the states that are what's considered CBD only laws, which is a non-psychoactive molecule in the plant. Then furthermore, you have states that are CBD only legal states, but only for children with epilepsy. So if you're an adult with epilepsy in that state, you would not legally be able to attain cannabis CBD. So it's very confusing. It is changing every day. Each state as they come on, we field questions as to where can I get this medicine? It became legal yesterday. I want it now. I have a qualifying condition. And even then, once they have implemented a law or a form of a law, attaining the medicine could take up to 2-3 years sometimes. Some states take longer than others to get up and running in terms of patients being able to access cannabis as a medicine. So it's very confusing. It's important to look up your state laws. We also have staff that can go over that with you. We have on our website a whole section dedicated to state laws, whether they're legal, illegal, CBD only for children. Some are recreationally legal, and what does that mean, and how does that affect the medical patient, and so on. So it's a great resource, and that is being updated every day. Patients who don't fall into the list of conditions within their state, even though the state is a legal state on some level for cannabis, they do fall into the medically illegal status if they don't have that specific qualifying condition or within that list. Many patients that we speak to are in that category, and they either are forced to move or they attain it illegally, which is unfortunate. So there are states as well that have reciprocity. There are some states that you can go to that will allow you to attain medical cannabis even though you're an out-of-state patient. But it becomes very complicated. Again, this is something that we consult with patients every day on because it is very confusing. The lines are very blurred, and nobody wants to get in trouble. They want to abide by the law, but sometimes they have to move, and you'd be surprised at how many people are willing to break the law to save a loved one's life. In speaking about Utah, if you are a cancer patient, child or adult, you would not have access to this medicine. They are solely focused on children with epilepsy. So this is a much more limiting state. I will say that they recently passed a law for research in the state of Utah in human trials. So this is great progress, even though they are very conservative as of now with their access to this medicine. Some of the states that have a bit more leeway would be the state of Washington. Washington is recreational and medical, and also has reciprocity. So if you're a patient from another state, you can come to the state of Washington and attain medicine and get treatment. In terms of state laws, legal, illegal, CBD or otherwise, once patients attain this medicine, if they've had to leave their own state to do so, once they've attained it legally, to get it home to their state is illegal. It is illegal to transport cannabis across any state lines. So people do run a risk of either losing their medicine or facing charges of some sort depending on their state. So in essence, when you fly to another state to attain this medicine legally, where a state has reciprocity and where you can attain this medicine, returning home could result in a felony. Crossing state lines with this medicine, flying, driving, what have you, you run the risk of a felony, of acquiring a felony charge. So it's very important to get all of your information, understand what the parameters are, understand what the risks are, and so on. It's really, really important. As I said before, the qualifying conditions in each state vary. So while one could be a legal cannabis patient for autism, epilepsy, PTSD, what have you, in other states that might not be a qualifying condition. So this is definitely true. You could be legal in one state and illegal in another. Very, very confusing. Patients call who don't know the first thing about this industry, but they would hope and they expect that their doctor should be able to not only write them a recommendation for this medicine, but also do a full intake and assessment, recommend the proper formulation, dosing, and potency, and then direct them to where they can get this medicine. But this is not the case. It is illegal for a physician to direct a patient to product. It's a federally illegal drug, and therefore they cannot take part in directing patients to products. This is considered aiding and abetting. So unfortunately, patients are forced to go down a route that can be confusing, can seem illegitimate, and that's what we're here for, a bit of hand-holding. The doctor can write a recommendation. A lot of times they're passed to us, to our medical staff. A full intake is done. They understand from there what their formulation, dosing, and potency should be, and then we can tell them what companies carry these products. I have heard quite a bit about states wanting to limit the potency of products in general in the cannabis industry. I have two perspectives on that. In terms of edibles, I don't see a need to have 300 milligram brownies or cupcakes or what have you. But that is separate from utilizing cannabis as a medicine. When you think of cannabis oil that people are using for cancers, some cancers need a much higher potency, but it's utilized differently. It's not recreationally used. Also, each patient has a different tolerance, has a different metabolism. We process everything differently. So when one patient might respond to a very minute dose of cannabis, others may need a bit more. So to limit potency on the medical side of cannabis medicine would be challenging. We work within about 15 different formulations of cannabis oils, tinctures. There's transdermal patches for pain and nausea, suppositories, capsules. Within that sector, I would be worried to limit potencies. But within brownies, cupcakes, lollipops, and so on, I would not have an issue and don't see a reason not to limit those potencies. So limiting potencies in terms of cannabinoids would affect medical patients, whether it's an autoimmune disease, whether it's geriatrics, cancers, gastrointestinal, what have you. Limiting the potencies would affect patients. Again, each patient is treated differently. They have different needs per their medical history, and putting a cap on how much medicine that they're able to access would be a challenge. My worry is that it might force part of the industry back into the black market. THCA is a hot topic currently, so I'm glad you asked about that. THCA is cannabis in its raw form. So in order to get the psychoactive THC, the plant matter needs to be heated to a certain degree to become psychoactive. So many people are seeing incredible results with THCA, and this comes in the form of juicing the cannabis plant. If you were to have a plant in your home and you juice it just like wheatgrass, that is THCA. That is the acid form of cannabinoids. People see great results when juicing the plant. It also helps with cancers. It helps with autoimmune. It's an incredible anti-inflammatory. I mean, the list goes on. So THCA is now very popular, being that it's non-psychoactive. It's been utilized quite a bit. One of the challenges of attaining it are that not many companies are making THCA tinctures. There's a handful of companies. It's definitely up and coming. But the juicing of the plant becomes a challenge because there aren't a lot of people that have access to that quantity of raw plant matter, green plant matter, not dried. The plant doesn't have a lot of water in it, so when you juice it, it yields tablespoons at a time, depending on how much you're juicing, and you would need access to quite a bit of plant matter, unfortunately, but there are great results as an anti-inflammatory and an anti-cancer with THCA. We have had many reports that THCA is much stronger than prednisone as an anti-inflammatory, which is wonderful as prednisone has such side effects. THCA, you are not high at all. You could take it 3 times a day and you're not high at all, yet the results are significant. What is the difference between hemp and cannabis? We hear that quite a bit. So we are told by genetic experts that the plants are the same. Their characteristics are a bit different, but you hear about CBD from hemp and CBD from cannabis. The molecule CBD is the same in both plants. The hemp plant and the cannabis plant have different offerings medicinally. CBD is CBD across the board. So in hemp CBD, you would get anti-inflammatory, you would get some anti-seizure effect, you would get quite a bit of health and wellness application out of CBD from hemp. But when you have CBD from cannabis, there are much more offerings in terms of medicine. There's the anti-inflammatory, the anti-cancer, the terpenes, the flavonoids, all the cannabinoids and subcannabinoids. Medicinally speaking, the cannabis plant has more to offer. When we talk about CBD and hemp CBD, and the fact that people are talking that it's legal in all 50 states, we do hear that. I have seen a report or a letter from the FDA reiterating that CBD is still a Schedule 1, although it hasn't hindered these companies that are selling within all 50 states. And it's not typically harmful. It is a health and wellness product, but a lot of the hemp that is imported has been found to have heavy metals, so we have to be really careful about heavy metals. We have to look at the testing results. I wouldn't buy any medicine, hemp or cannabis derived, that does not have a lab result with it, a current lab result with it. So CBD is CBD wherever you find it, but medicinally speaking, the cannabis plant has a lot more to offer than the hemp plant does. Is cannabis medicine safe? Is it all tested? It all should be tested. All of cannabis medicine is not tested. It should be required, and it should be a very rigorous level that these companies should be held to. We find that a lot of lab testing that comes with products, when you go to a dispensary and request the lab testings, the sheets that'll be a report could be 6 months old. You need to make sure that those lab tests are current. You also need those lab tests to know exactly what you're getting. You know, if it says it's a CBD tincture or a THC tincture, how much CBD, how much THC are we talking about? You want to make sure you're getting your money's worth as well. You don't want to pay a high price for something that might have only a minute amount of cannabinoids in it. So as a consumer, the lab testing is important. As a patient, it's extremely important. There are pesticides that are used on the cannabis plant, just like they're used on spinach and lettuce, that are approved by the USDA and the FDA. Because when we buy vegetables and fruits, we can just rinse that off with water and it's considered harmless. But they have not been tested in terms of ingesting. So with the cannabis plant, some people are vaporizing their cannabis for great pain relief from cancer bone pain or arthritis, many different types of pain. People will use a vapor system. So when you ingest, breathe into your lungs these pesticides that have been approved by the USDA and the FDA, it has not been tested for safety into the lungs, ingesting of any way, ingesting. So we have found that there are reports of some patients, there have been some deaths from inhaling these heated pesticides. So again, to recap, these pesticides are approved by the FDA and the USDA, but not for inhaling or ingesting. When you inhale, you heat up the cannabis plant and then you ingest it into your lungs. This can be lethal and needs to be regulated. In lab testing, they do test for molds, fecal matter, pesticides, and some will test for heavy metals, which is important in terms of hemp products, being that they are mostly imported. So yes, testing labs cover molds, mildews, fecal matter, microbials, and so on. When buying medicine and insisting on those lab results, current lab results, we have found through our own path that even the labels on products don't match the lab results. For instance, you could buy a capsule that is labeled a daytime capsule, but when you actually read the lab results, it is very much a nighttime product. So there needs to be, again, a bar raised in terms of the rigor of products and testing. We've witnessed some growers that have an excess amount of a certain type of plant, and they have a buyer who's looking for a high CBD plant to make their tinctures and oils for their epileptic patients. And when the product company tests that raw plant, once they buy it, very large amount, it is high THC, not high CBD. And it has happened where growers will sell their product under a different title just because they need to sell that allotment that they've grown. When we talk about strain names, and yes, we get those questions quite a bit, I need this strain, I need that strain, I read here or there that this is the strain I need. We have to re-educate the patients and families because it's really not the strain name, it's the genetics, it's the testing. So if you grow a certain strain in Washington, Southern California, New York, Florida, Canada, their test results are going to come out dramatically different. So when we're looking for a specific type of treatment for a patient, it really boils down to the genetics and the lab testing. The soils are different, the atmosphere is different, the weather is different, the water is different, the chemicals in the water in each of these areas. So that all trickles down to what the plant presents in the end. So being fixated on strain names will create challenges, and it's best to address the genetics and the lab tests. We see great synergy in combining conventional treatment with cannabis as medicine. When we consult with patients who want to combine, they don't want to choose one over the other, they're a bit afraid to do so, we still see great synergy. Most patients can avoid the side effects of chemotherapy. They, in turn, avoid all the medications they need to take for those side effects of chemotherapy. We see patients get through their chemotherapy treatments quite easily and happily and with good results. So we don't advise people to choose one over the other. We want them to stay in their comfort zone, but we do see a marked improvement when cannabis is combined with chemotherapy. When we are educating in our conferences, the number one thing that patients and medical professionals want to hear about is dosing. They're literally pulling their hair out. Why won't anybody tell us about dosing? That's what we need to know. And it's a challenging topic because each patient is different. Their medical history is different. So based on my father, treating him for stage 4 lung cancer with mets to the brain is one thing, but he also had a heart arrhythmia. So we needed to choose a formulation that wouldn't race his heart. That's just one example. But there are many, many patients with numerous conditions that they're addressing. They'll have their primary, which could be cancer. This is not a one-size-fits-all due to our gut function and how we metabolize. So we have had patients that one could be a senior in her 80s, and she's taking a high THC product and calling us and saying, I don't feel anything, I don't feel anything. Are you sure this is working? And then we could have somebody in their late 20s, early 30s fighting a cancer with the same product, taking the most minute amount, a drop the size of a sesame seed, and they are experiencing very uncomfortable psychoactive effects. So each patient metabolizes differently in addition to their drug-to-drug interactions. Many are on other pharmaceuticals for other conditions. If they're a cancer patient, a lot of times they're on painkillers. If you add a tiny amount of a cannabis product, that painkiller, that opiate, their effects will be shot through the roof. So there are so many factors to assess with a patient. Drug-to-drug interactions, what other pharmaceuticals are they on? Are they on other supplements? Some supplements and pharmaceuticals can negate one or the other, cannabis or another medication. So you want to make sure that you're not zeroing out any medications that you may need. You want to make sure that you're not inhibiting the cannabinoids from doing their work. So the drug-to-drug interactions, medical history, how we metabolize, how weak is the patient at the beginning. For instance, my father was fully wasting and on oxygen. And if we had hit it hard with a heavier-handed dosing with my father, he would have been asleep rather than awake to eat and gain strength so that he can then start fighting his disease. So in essence, we needed to start out extremely low, microdosing, extreme microdosing for my father. So he was awake and not impaired. And in turn, he ate, he gained strength every day, he continued to improve, and it turned out with my father that he didn't need to ramp up at all for anything in his cannabis treatment. And we were successful. So each patient is different. It's always best to start low and slow. You have to find out in that first week how the patient's going to respond. If it's no response at all, or maybe it's extremely challenging for them, and then we take that into account and make adjustments. But it's extremely important to take the whole patient into account and their medical history and all the pharmaceuticals and supplements that they're on. So when we treated my father, we were extremely lucky, with zero guidance, with zero support, with zero understanding of this plant and what it had to offer. We chose correctly out of the gate. My husband and I feel like we may have been divinely guided, I don't know, but we chose the right medicine and the right dosing for success. And that's why we're here today, is we're paying it forward. We were given a gift, and we're hoping to pass that gift on to you. There are many conferences that offer education in this industry. They have different characteristics and different goals, I would say. For our company, United Patients Group, we have chosen from the beginning many years ago to dive straight into medical. Our goal was to gain the trust of the conventional world, the physicians, pharmacists, nurses, medical institutions, local, state, and foreign governments who really weren't that thrilled about getting this type of education, but maybe knew that they were going to have to at some point. So we decided to dive into the pool of naysayers and step into their world where they're comfortable, with an atmosphere that they're comfortable with, university-style education, and present the science, gently feed them the science. There are many other conferences and organizations offering education, and of course, education is a positive no matter where you place it in this industry, but a lot of times they combine it with recreational as well. Might be more business oriented, might be more investment oriented. For us, education is all important. I think medical professionals need to find where their comfort zone is, what they're looking for, and with our conferences, we end up garnering about 85% medical professionals. We have a large following of pharmacists and pharmacist associations. We also have a large local, state, and foreign government following, and is exactly where we wanted to be, is in the very strict medical delivery of education. We just got back from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where we were able to offer a full day of education from 10 until 2 for senators, legislators, and their staffers on the science of medical cannabis, the regulation and testing thereof. This is a first in history that a cannabis company was allowed to come into the state capitol to bring education. There are many, many people that have been lobbying, and thankfully so, but we are proud to say that we were the first company to come in and offer medical and scientific education to legislators, staffers, and senators there at our nation's capital. We spend a lot of time working with governments, local, state, and foreign governments. We are asked to come in, thankfully so, to educate so that lawmakers can have a better understanding about the medical side of cannabis treatment. So then in turn they can draft laws that are much more comprehensive. There are many states who jump in and draft laws without the education, and they usually end up having to backtrack a bit and revise. So we are always thankful when we're invited in to bring this education. It's not force-fed, they ask for it, and then they're able to really spend time understanding what's important and how these laws should be written. So being Skyped into New Zealand, to being brought into the state of Utah or DC and more, we are happy to do that to ultimately alleviate pain and suffering to patients who need this medicine. So many medical professionals, universities, or even governments choose United Patients Group to come in to bring education to their state due to the fact that we have accredited curriculum, which is accredited for nurses, pharmacists, and physicians. So that's CME, CE, or ACPE, and more. Medical professionals are always looking for their additional hours of continued medical education, so this is a perk. When you have a 1 or 2 day conference, we can offer anywhere from 6 to 15 continued medical education credits for medical professionals. So it's a great way to learn a new science while getting your credits. So we are, next up on our list is Baltimore, Maryland. We will be there June 2nd and 3rd, and we have 2 full days of education for medical professionals, but also for the public. So this science is not so elevated that the layperson would not understand. This is great information for families, patients, caregivers, loved ones in cannabis science in a clinical setting. So we cover the gamut, and it's pretty popular, and people enjoy coming and learning and meeting the professionals and having a little networking in between. So Baltimore is next on our list. Universities are coming on board and embracing this education. We have partnered with quite a few universities to bring this science to their campuses. We've partnered with Sonoma State University, Department of Nursing, for one full day of education, and Cal North State University School of Medicine as well. We have universities working with us right now to implement our curriculum into their fall catalogs. So yes, there are universities that are coming on board, understanding that the importance of bringing this science to the forefront. It's definitely a shame that in medical school in general, the endocannabinoid system has not been addressed or is not being addressed. We talk to schools quite often, and they barely touch on medical cannabis just as a brief topic, within 30 minutes, just as a topic of discussion. But the endocannabinoid system is extremely important to be covered in medical schools, just like the digestive system. This is a system that was discovered, this is proven, yet it's not taught in medical schools, and this needs to change right now. Some of the exciting new science that is coming up and is the genetics, the DNA testing in the cannabis plant, in the seeds. I'm far from an expert in this area, but we really enjoy bringing these experts into our conferences to discuss this topic. But we hear that someday it will be possible from the seed to have the exact DNA and to know exactly what will be grown in that plant, rather than what we have now is growers will grow a certain plant, and it won't be until the testing stage before they're going to sell the product that they know exactly what's in that. And I have heard that this DNA testing of seeds will change that, and we will know what each seed is going to produce. And that is really exciting. I have heard all the way down to tissue testing. This is way, way into the science, far from my knowledge base, but it is very exciting to have much more consistency in plants and in turn plant medicine, tinctures, oils, etc. Well, what I hope to find in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of medical cannabis, of course, is legalization so that no patient would have to suffer. My dad always says, why is it that I am able to live due to my zip code, yet somebody else writing me from another state has to die because of their zip code? It should not be this way. So of course in the next 5 to 10 years, or hopefully sooner, we'll be able to see legalization across the board. We also would love to see better approaches to dosing and formulation, different products, more efficient products, less guesswork, more guidance, more medical institutions and physicians on board and fully up to speed, fully educated. Those are my wishes and the wishes of our company. I would hope that all 50 states would be on board ultimately for legalization. I would hope for that. I think there will always be discrepancies in terms of qualifying conditions per state until the federal status changes. I have a lot of wishful thinking, but for pain and suffering, there should be no pain and suffering. If this medicine is helping in some states, it's going to help in the rest. And I think it's a travesty if all 50 states do not come on board for this type of treatment. I think it should be available to all patients. We have heard, unfortunately, of families who have a young child suffering from cancer, late-stage cancer, and the doctors tell these families there's nothing more we can do, and they send the families home and the child home on hospice care. And these families many of them have decided to turn to cannabis treatment as one last effort, just like we did with my father. And unfortunately, there are many stories of these children seeing success with cannabis, a turnaround, and next thing you know, Child Protective Services is coming in and taking their child and forcing them back into more rounds of chemo and radiation, even though they were just told that there's nothing more that can be done. I hope that this is alleviated, eradicated. This should never, ever, ever happen. If a doctor says there's no more hope, we all should be free to access this medicine. And no child should have to be forced back into chemotherapy when the doctors all know that at that point there is no hope. We get this question all the time, patients who are forced to fly to a legal state to attain their medicine and to fly back or drive back. We do hear this often. It's a shame. People shouldn't have to be forced to break the law to try this medicine. These patients are not people flying across the country to get a product to get high. These people are literally fighting for their life. Sometimes they can't even fly themselves. A different family member has to fly for them or drive for them, and in turn risking their livelihood. They may be arrested. They should not be forced to do this. You'd be surprised at who is doing this, what level of people, whether they're clergy, to medical researchers, to law enforcement, to, you name it. Suffering is suffering, and people are always searching for a way to save a loved one. Now they know, based on other states' results, they know that it's possible that cannabis will help their loved one. If it's possible, sure, why not try it? Why not? So yes, people are forced to break the law. We've seen some people trying to ship it back home. The medicine is intercepted and it doesn't make it home, and now that family is paid good money for that medicine, yet only to come home to not receive it, which is a shame when they're struggling financially anyway with their medical bills. So yes, we've seen that quite a bit. We've seen a family member drive to a legal state to attain the medicine, to drive it back to their home state for a loved one, and get stopped and arrested in a state in between, facing felony charges because of that state's laws. It is a travesty. All we're trying to do, and all these people are trying to do, is save a loved one's life. These are not drug dealers. These are not recreational users. It breaks our heart every day. And I can say that in our office, tears are shed every day based on these struggles. So the only thing that they've done wrong is choose to reside in a cannabis illegal state. Many can't even afford to move to a legal state. They would if they had the money. We have a client right now who talks to us every week. I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. I can't afford to get out of here. I need to get this medicine for my husband. And our hands are tied, yet we can't hang up the phone. This is real. This is real struggle, real suffering, and real medicine. There are so many stories of families relocating just to save a loved one's life, to be able to get this medicine on a regular basis. We know quite a few of them. They're in cannabis legal states now, living, working, but the challenges run deep. There's families that constantly say, I want to go home, I want to go home, but my state is not legal. They've relocated, they have medicine, but they've uprooted not only their sick family member, but the rest of the children in the family. They've had to leave their friendship groups, enter new schools, the struggles of entering a new school, trying to make new friends, new circles, parents having to leave their careers and in turn grab any job that they can that have nothing to do with their career choice, but they need to bring in an income to provide this medicine for their child or their mother or wife. So the medical refugees have a lot of struggles, a lot of emotional struggles. They're going through the hardest times of their life, yet they're separated from their greatest foundation, which is their family, their parents, their grandparents. And those family members want to be with their sick family member as well. But it is splitting families down the middle just so that somebody can survive, hopefully survive. Many families, their choices only become a medical refugee and move to a cannabis legal state or stay home and attain it illegally. So attaining it illegally, you spend a lot of money. You don't usually know who you're getting it from. Most of the time, they don't come with lab results. Because shipping is illegal, the shipper is not going to have any information attached to it. There may not even be labels on it. So the challenges are great, and even if they do order this medicine to be shipped to them, it may not make it there. So living in a cannabis illegal state and attaining it illegally is a challenge, but also becoming a medical refugee and moving is an extreme challenge. It's a very difficult place to be in, yet those of us here in California have the luxury of treating ourselves legally and within the comfort of our own home and with our families around us.
Thank you for watching the entire expert interview from your premium package of the Sacred Plant Healing Secrets Exposed, and thanks again for your support. We are continuing our research, and you'll be the first to hear about our findings. Together we can change and save people's lives everywhere. Thank you, and God bless.